Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's Food Systems in Season. My name is Bill Lester. I'm with University of Florida Extension in Hernando County, Florida, and I'm here today with Wendy Lynch, who is also with University of Florida Extension. She is our regional or our district family and consumer sciences agent, and we have two special speakers here joining us today. Brittany Hall-Scharf is also with University of Florida Extension in Hernando County, Florida. She is the Sea Grant agent, not secret agent, but Sea Grant. So she is basically our marine biologist. She's going to be talking to us a little bit about seafood today. And Yilin Zhuang is our district's water expert. And Yilin, is that your correct title? I know that you're our water specialist.
It's a little bit long. You are right. It's Water Resources, the regional specialized agent. Close enough.
Oh, that is a long title. So we're having all kinds of internet problems this morning. So that's why we're trying to keep the cameras to a minimum here. But let's go ahead and get started and jump right into it now as we're going through all this. If any of you have any questions, please just go ahead and put them in the comments down right below where you're watching the video here on YouTube Live. And at the end, we can read the comments and questions and go back and answer them. But let's go ahead and get started with mentioning that this is just one of a whole series of shows that we have going on for this winter, and we have a whole nother series planned for this coming spring also. So today we're going to be talking all about water with Brittany and with Yilin, and then next week we have people coming to explain the basics of how to go about raising chickens and raising honeybees, which we get a lot of questions about. There's a lot of interest in that. Then the Friday after that, February 4th, is going to be our wrap-up Q&A session for our winter series. And we're going to have, hopefully, all of our presenters come back and be able to answer any questions that come up and help get all of you started, whether it's eating more seafood or growing fruits and vegetables or raising bees or whatever it might be. So, Brittany, let me go ahead and I'm going to turn myself off here.
All right, well, thanks, Bill. My name is Brittany Scharf, and I am the marine agent here located in Hernando County. And today I am going to give a presentation about recreational harvest of bay scallops in Florida. Next slide, please. There you go. So I'm going to start off talking about our recreational harvest here that occurs during our summertime. I'll give an introduction to our bay scallop biology and some of its ecology. And then I'm going to go over some safe scalloping and harvesting practices that we recommend here with University of Florida and Florida Sea Grant. And then end with some opportunities that you may have to participate in ensuring that we have a sustainable recreational bay harvest season here in Florida. And then some resources that you can go back and remind yourself of what we talked about today in our presentation. Next slide, please. So our recreational harvest, what you see here on the slide is the current 2022 or 2022 recreational scallop season dates and zones that have been published by the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. So this is on their website. And as you can see here, Pasco County and Clote is the furthest south of this recreational harvest season, and then it goes all the way up, I guess you can't see my mouse, here in the Panhandle to Gulf County. These zones do not have the same opening and closing dates, as well as they have different bag limits. So it's very important to reference the Fish and Wildlife's website before you go out to this recreational harvest to make sure that you are abiding by the open, closed dates, as well as those bag limits. Yes, this is a summer harvest. So why am I talking about a summer harvest and we're only in January? Folks actually start booking for their recreational harvest 6 months to 12 months in advance. And then they also start actually going out and scouting these areas, out in May if these seasons aren't opening till June or July. So it is relevant to technically what's in season here in January. I will also note that there is only a recreational harvest for bay scallops here in Florida. There used to be a commercial harvest, but that closed in 1994 because it is such a dynamic fishery. It can only sustain a recreational harvest at this time. All right, so bridging into bay scallop biology and ecology. So for starters, a bay scallop is what we call a bivalve mollusk. So this simply means that it's going to have two shells that are joined by a hinge. And the cool thing, and I'll show you in a few minutes with these bay scallops, if you look at the edge of those shells, they have about 40 blue eyes that are really beautiful. When the sun is out and the water is clear, you can see those blue eyes sparkling back at you. And yes, they can technically see you with these blue eyes. They might not be able to see your face, but those eyes help them to sense changes in light and dark, so they can sense if a predator is coming, and they can either clam up or swim away. So going on that note, they are filter feeders like an oyster, but unlike an oyster, they're not stuck to something. They can swim short distances. So what they're going to do is they're going to take those two shells, use that hinge, open and shut those shells, and then that muscle that you harvest and eat, which we call the abductor muscle, is actually what is using to power that shell opening and closing for it to swim away from you. These guys, so when they filter feed, they're filter feeding those tiny particles out of the water, the small algae and nutrients, and they can actually filter about 4 gallons of water per hour. So pretty efficient for such a small organism. Here in Florida, they only live 1 to 2 years. So again, a very dynamic fishery because they have a short lifespan. And considering we have a fishery that opens each year and closes right before they are able to add back to the population that feeds into next year's season, it's very important that we harvest these scallops in a sustainable way. We consider scallops to be synchronous spawners. So this means that they are going to spawn at the same time. They will typically do this when the water temperature changes in the fall and winter, and so that will trigger those scallops to release their eggs and sperm into the water. A single scallop is going to have both male and female parts, but they're not necessarily going to, that single scallop is not going to release those male and female parts at the same time. So when the others are spawning, that one might choose to release the female parts at that time, and then another date, maybe a few weeks away or next month, they'll then release the male gametes. So they're going to broadcast those eggs and sperm into the water, and once that then becomes fertilized, it's going to create what we call embellisher. So that's just a fancy term for a pelagic larvae that's going to drift through the water. They'll be in that water column for about 10 to 14 days. And eventually they'll have these small, fine little threads that baby scallop is going to attach to a seagrass blade. It will then grow to a larger scallop, and then eventually those threads will detach and the larger scallop is going to fall to the bottom of the seagrass, and they'll live out the rest of their life. So this is typically happening, October to January isn't when they're reproducing, and then that recreational season is going to open from June to July. So in a few moments, you'll see a video of how quickly these scallops can grow. So they're growing an estimated about 2 millimeters per day. So this tells you about 10 millimeters. They're almost about a ½ an inch big. They're going to be about 2 months old. Scallops, they need good water quality to grow and to survive. They're very sensitive to changes in environmental conditions. So if we have a loss of seagrass, which is that habitat that they're attaching to as a baby scallop to grow and living the rest of their life, it serves as a camouflage. If that is degraded, they've lost their habitat. That can really affect a scallop population. They are also very sensitive to large rainfall events. So if we have a hurricane or a really rainy season, And we have too much fresh water because these guys like a salinity of about 20 to 35 parts per thousand. So what that means is fresh water is usually a 0. Very marine ocean water is going to be about 35 parts per thousand. So they like that 20 to 35 parts. If we have too much fresh water going on, that could really hurt your scallop population. Things like high turbidity or pollutants or red tide blooms, if we have a lot of sedimentation in a system because that seagrass is ripped out, or we have a lot of erosion in the area, again, that can suffocate out those scallops. So let's proceed to our first video, Bill. So this is that seagrass habitat that your scallops like to hide in. They're very good camouflage. So you see one here on your screen hiding out in the grass. In a minute, I'll pick it up and hopefully you can see those bright blue eyes on the edge looking back at you. There you go. So he clams up, he shuts up when he sees me coming, and that is a defense mechanism from those predators. So let's go to the next video. All right, so to your left here, that is the 2 shells in the hinge that connects it in the middle. So that is your adult scallop that's about 1 to 2 years old. And then moving to the right, I have a nickel there in place just for a size reference. But this is how quickly those scallops can grow. That is definitely not the smallest that they can be, but going from top to bottom, I mean, they're growing that fast between October and August of the next year. All right, we can go ahead and go, there we go. So these are going to be your shell color variations. So at the top you have a darker shell. Typically your darker shell is going to be on top, the lighter shell is going to be on bottom. That's a method of camouflage. You're looking from up and down towards the bottom. You have a lot of dark on the bottom. If you are, the scallop is swimming and you're looking up, you have the light coming through. So it's going to be a lighter shell to help camouflage. And then you also see an orange shell there. About 4% of your scallops out there will have this orange color. So a lot of folks, as they're out there scalloping, they consider those to be a gem and they like to keep those shells. We can go ahead and move to video 4. So this is the kind of equipment that you're typically going to need. So a mask and snorkel and fins for sure. Some people like scuba gear, a recreational saltwater license. What's really important for these scallops, because they can swim, is a bag that you can put them in and cinch it up. You are in the water, so you need a dive flag either carried with you or put at the highest point of your vessel. And then some kind of measuring device. So typically people use a 5-gallon bucket. The 5-gallon mark is here where you see my finger at the handle. Most people think that 5 gallons is all the way to the top of the bucket, but it's not. So it's important to note where your 5-gallon measurement is. Some folks like to use a little hand net, especially in the deeper waters here in Hernando or Pasco. That way, some people have a problem with clearing their ears. So that can be useful, but not necessary. And then, of course, a cooler to store your scallops in, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So that is the basic equipment that you will need. All right. So this is just a quick video of what it looks like when you are scalloping. You see the mask, the fins, the snorkel. It's pretty shallow water. You're typically 3 to 5 feet deep. You can swim down, grab a scallop, and then put it in your bag. And again, it's nice to have one of those bags that cinch closed, because they will try to swim away from you. And if you are putting them in a bag that's not closed, you'll look down and all the scallops that you have collected are gone. All right, so let's go over our next video with how to measure a scallop. So you see here a smaller scallop to the left or on the top of the screen, and we're going to measure from the bottom to the top. And we're looking for about 1.5 inches. So the one that you see here at the top is 1.5 inches. And then the one at the bottom here is over 2 inches. So we recommend that you go for those larger scallops. But how do you know what is 1.5 inches when you're out there in the water? You're not going to have a ruler. We'll head to your cooler. Most of you will have a nice cold beverage in there. Flip it over and put that scallop there in the bottom. That will let you know that it's at least 1.5 inches, and it's okay to keep. Yes, there isn't a size minimum out there when you look at the regulations, but we do like to recommend that you choose those larger scallops, because not only is there more meat for you to harvest, but it's letting those smaller scallops then reach that spawning October timeframe, that winter timeframe at the end of the season, and add back to the population. So when you are harvesting these scallops, it's important to do it in a manner that is not going to make you sick, essentially. So we recommend using a cooler method full of ice. You're looking for like a temperature of 41 degrees Fahrenheit or below, so dump a lot of ice in that cooler. And the aim of the game is not to keep those scallops alive throughout your fishing trip. I know a lot of people will put them in a 5-gallon bucket full of water, and that water is just getting hotter and hotter on the deck. But we don't want harmful bacteria to grow in your scallops as that water temperature gets hotter and they're sitting in the sun. So store them in the cooler, prevent some foodborne illnesses from happening. And it's important as well to keep those scallops away from the meltwater. So continuously drain your cooler. Some people even like to put a towel on top of the ice and then put their scallops on top of that just to keep them out of that water. But it's the best way to store them. And it also helps you with the cleaning process, because those scallops are going to start relaxing, and that muscle that will typically clamp them shut, that scallop will now be open, and it'll be easier to clean them, so you don't have to pry them open as hard. Let's go ahead to our next video, Bill. All right, so cleaning them. Find that dark shell, put it up. You can use a butter knife or a shucking shell, pry it open. You see here we've detached that white abductor muscle. You pull those innards downward, all gently in one piece, and you're left with the nice, tasty abductor white muscle. And then it's important, after you are finished cleaning all those scallops, to rinse that leftover meat with cool, cold water, not hot water, because you're going to end up cooking that muscle, to make sure you get any extra gunk off of it. And then go ahead and store it in a nice clean container, or go ahead and cook it. Also keep in mind too, when you're using those utensils, whether it's out on the boat or at home, make sure they're clean. Take a few breaks in between as you're going through your 5-gallon bucket of shells, and make sure you're continuously cleaning your utensils. If you're out on the water, get yourself a little soapy station to take a break to wash your hands and clean those utensils. I know a lot of folks also like to use shucking stations that you may find along the way as you're going back to the boat ramp. But keep in mind too, take a look at what utensils they are using to make sure that they are clean. Next video. All right, so as you are cleaning your shells, please be mindful where you place them, and don't dump those shells in a channel, at the boat ramp, or in a shallow water area. They're sharp to step on. And again, you're not only disposing those shells, but you're disposing the innards. So if we're putting all that biological matter in a channel or a shallow area that doesn't flush well, you are now going to degrade the water quality, and you could have some algae blooms and really hurt the system. As well as those channels that you're coming into with your boat, you're now filling it. And so in a few years from now, you eventually might have to find somewhere else, because they're going to have to spend a lot of money to then dredge those channels so then you can use them. Going on to safety gear. Another thing, it's very important, it's a family affair. You have friends on your boat, but before you go anywhere, make sure everybody knows where that fresh water is, where the first aid kit is, where is the sunscreen on the board. Use a hat or a shirt or some kind of sun protection. Where's a flotation device? Where is your PFDs? Where's the fire extinguisher if something happens? Where's the flares? Any other safety equipment? Just make sure somebody else on the vessel besides you knows where this stuff is. That way, if something does happen to you, other people can help you. Next slide. Develop a safety plan. So we like to recommend, you're out there in the summertime. What happens in Florida? Thunderstorms. So start at your furthest point out and work your way in back to the boat ramp. That way, if a storm does come up quickly, you have a very short area that you have to run. You're not 8 miles offshore with your head in the water. Tell people where you are before you get on the boat. We know that boats can break down, and so having a contact on shore, that way if you don't return, they can get assistance to you quickly. When everybody is in the water, it's important to leave one person on board. Anchors do not always hold. So you don't want your face in the water, you're going after these scallops, and you look up and you don't know where your boat is. So keep somebody on board so they can make sure not only that your anchor is holding, but if somebody gets tired, you can help them out of the water. Especially when those tides change, it can become really swift. So if somebody gets tired, they're a weak swimmer, or this is your 5th location for the day and they've been getting in and out of the boat, that person left on board can help that other person out of the water. All right. So this black box up here is supposed to be a boat with a dive flag on top. So just pretend like you're out on the water snorkeling, looking for those scallops. But my point here is dive flag safety. Follow the rules. So there are different size dive flags that you must have, whether it's on your boat or if it's hooked to you and you're snorkeling around in the water. So make sure you check FWC's website for the specifics on how far you can be from that dive flag, where it needs to be. But an important thing that I often see is it's not at the highest point of your vessel if it's on your vessel. And 2, if you are out of the water, take your dive flag down. Do not motor from one point to another with your dive flag, because that dive flag is a communication with others that you are in the water, so they need to slow down and avoid the area. So it's very important to use that dive flag like it should be, and lower that dive flag and take it down when you're out of the water and relocating from one point to another. As you saw in one of the videos, these scallops are in shallow seagrass. We're talking 3 feet, 5 feet, maybe 8 feet deep. So it's important to follow some seagrass safe boating. So avoid the very shallow seagrass areas when possible, especially when those tides change, and stay in those channel areas. If you must go on those shallow seagrass beds, trim that motor up, troll through it slowly. Make sure you're not chopping that grass up behind you. And then if you get in really shallow water and you're going to be stuck, lift your motor up, get out of your boat, and push your boat through it. That way, again, you're not ripping up that essential habitat that those scallops rely on. And then we should have one last, there we go. So one way you can get involved. So we have it here in Hernando County. We call them Scallop Sitters. So here you see a predator exclusion cage that we have anchored. It's full of scallops, and then it's connected to a buoy here at the surface. That way you can easily find it. So we have volunteers here that babysit these scallops between the months of July and all the way through February. And they have these scallops in the cage. That way they have a better chance of reproducing. They're closer together, so when they release the male and female parts, you have a higher chance of them fertilizing and then growing into scallops that will then feed next year's recreational harvest. So we have volunteers out there. It's been a successful program. We've had highest preseason numbers that we have had in our area for 8 years since we have started this program. If you are in the Panhandle, there are similar folks within IFAS that do this program as well. So that is one way you can get involved. And then again, to reference some of those resources of the material that I covered quickly today, you see those materials on your screen. And we are looking for volunteers for the Scallop Sitters over the next month. So if you're interested, shoot me an email and I will show you how to sign up. And with that, I will pass it back to Bill.
Okay, Brittany, thank you so much. That was really great. I know that we got at least one quick comment here on the picture of your son at the very beginning of your PowerPoint, I think. So I wanted to be sure to share that. And now we have Yilin Zhuang, who is with University of Florida. She is our Central District water resource person. I'll let her share her exact title once again, because I always get tripped up on it a lot. And it's funny because we like to say that Yilin is kind of in charge of water, or works with water, or works with clean water, but really everybody in Extension does, because it's such an important topic, so very important to all of us, that all of our jobs touch on water in one way or another, but all of her job touches on water.
Thank you so much, Bill. And thank you for the introduction. Just like Bill said, my title, it's a little bit long. So it's the Water Resources Regional Specialized Agent in Central Florida. So like Bill said, it just I usually just refer myself as the water girl. And in Extension, all of us have sort of a water appointment. Some maybe a little bit, some maybe a lot more. And for me, it's 100%. It's all about water, because water is the foundation of life. Water connects everything. So that's, I find the beauty of also, especially this series. It's how everything is tied together, and how everyone in Extension can be tied by water. So I'm very happy to be here to give this talk. Just not necessarily talk, more like just to chat with everyone here. Because Bill is very nice. Just mention it's like my job, it's clean water. Oftentimes I have another name. It's when I was doing some youth program for each camps, these kids usually call me the queen of the poo-poo factory, because I cover a lot of number one and the number two business. It's just the wastewater and how we treat that wastewater. And I also cover reclaimed water. And today it's a little bit different. You can see I'm in the office. So that's our office kitchen. So what I want to cover is about your drinking water. So a little bit of background story is another co-host of this series, Wendy Lynch. Yesterday, she sent an email about her water quality, like at the office. Her water didn't seem to be, at least raise a little bit of concern. So a question asked her was, is your water on well, or it's public water? So for those who are viewing this live talk, could you put in the chat box and let me know if you have well water or you have utility water? Sometimes we just say it's city water. Because to know that, it is very important to help us to understand safe water or drinking water. I'm checking the chat box. I don't see.
Hopefully everybody knows what kind of water service they're on.
Don't feel bad if you don't know that, because it seems like I'm putting my colleague on the spotlight. But yesterday she was like, oh, that's a good question. I don't know it. So it's very, because she's in a commercial building. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to figure that out. So an easy way for our homeowners. So a simple question is, do you pay your utility bill? So every month you receive a bill which has water, has sewer, then we know you're on public water supply. You have you have city water, and then you have city sewer. So if you don't receive your water bill, highly likely you are on well. Another way to find that out is if you turn on the water, it kicks off the pump. So somewhere in front of your yard, or in front of your house, behind your house, backyard, there's a pump there. So every time you turn on the water, the pump kicks on. So that's another way to find out what type of water are you receiving. The reason I mentioned that, why it is important to understand if you have city water or you have well water, because the difference here, if you receive public water supply, if it's city water, then your utility is responsible for the safety of the water. In other words, the water meets the safe drinking water standard. If you are on wells, believe or not, there are just not that many regulations to make sure the water you are drinking, the whole household is consuming, is safe. So some counties, they may require a new drilled well to test the bacteria. And it's only some counties, it's not all the state of Florida. And it's the condition, it's also a new well. And oftentimes it's not required. So there's just no regulations for private wells. It's the well owner's responsibility to make sure the water is safe to drink. And oftentimes I was asked that question. I just bought a house. So is it required to test my water? The answer is, unfortunately, the answer is no. So no state laws require to test water. Oftentimes it's required by the mortgage company. So the mortgage company will ask a water testing. So speaking of water testing, so the question is, it's where to test it, especially if you are on well water. You want to know if your water is safe to drink or not. Where can I get it tested? And how to get it tested. So first is where it's, you can see in the chat box, there's a link. I highly suggest you to use certified labs. Let me take one step back. First, call your local health department, because some counties, the local health department still have the water sampling programs. But some counties, because of lack of staff and sometimes the lack of just the need, they stop doing the water testing programs. So call your health department first to see if they still have that opportunity or not. If they don't, there's a list of it's the state certified labs, because they use a standardized method to make sure they follow certain procedures and the results are reliable. Because a lot of times, I'm not sure about you. It's like when I'm home, like people knock on the door and they want to test my water. And when they test my water, they just give me a tube like that, probably only 2 ml. So they add this job and that job, shake it, like doing their magic trick, and they tell you, oh, look, because then you see some cloudiness or you may see some precipitation. They will tell you, oh, that water is terrible. Can you believe you're drinking that water? And I'm like, yes, I can believe that. I'm drinking that water. I know my water quality. Could you tell me what's inside? So they don't usually tell you that. It's more like a sales trick. So I highly recommend everyone to use certified lab. And here's the list of where you can find it. And when it comes to water testing, usually it's a misconception. People think you collect a bottle of water, you send to the lab, and the lab will tell you all the water analytes. So it will tell you they do a comprehensive water testing and tell you, hey, your water is good to go. Oh, just like these sales representatives, they do one magic and they tell you the overall water quality. But in reality, water testing doesn't work like that. You need to know what you want to test. Then the lab will follow the protocol of this particular analyte to test it. So that can add a little bit barrier for homeowners to understand the water chemistry and the water analytes to know what to test. So we usually say it's for Florida. First, I will focus on well water, and then I will also touch on city water because the needs are a little bit different. Because for well water, actually, no matter well water and the city water, over 90% of our drinking water is from the groundwater, Florida groundwater. Because Florida groundwater is still one of the best groundwater or aquifer in the nation. So there not a lot of water treatment is needed. There's still some concern when it's elevated nitrate. And also as a homeowner, you want to test some 3 basic water analytes, start from bacteria and the nitrate and the lead. So if you can do these 3 once a year, that's highly recommended. If you can't, due to the cost, because 3 add together depends on which kind of labs, ranging from probably $50 to $200. So if it's a little bit cost prohibitive, then highly suggest test the bacteria once a year. Then the cost range from $20 to $50, depends on the lab, and also depends if you collect the samples or you ask a sampler to come to your house collect it. Then it can add about another $50 to the testing. So what I'm going to show you is how to collect a water sample for bacteria test, because you don't really need a sampler to do that. As long as you follow the procedures, you can do that. So the first step, you can see I have all my supply here. So what you need to do first is to get this bacteria sample bottle from a lab. It can be from your local health department, or you can request it from a certified lab. They will show you it's all this type of bottles. This bottle is sterile. They are totally treated, making sure inside there's no bacteria. Because the worst thing for a bacteria test is you use a contaminated bottle. So you request that bottle from a lab, and then you set aside, because before you collect the water sample, like I mentioned, the worst thing to do a bacteria test is you cross-contaminate that. You introduce the bacteria into the sample. So the very first thing here, let me move my camera a little bit so you can see better, is to wash your hands. So follow the protocol to wash your hands. So I would like to demonstrate that, but probably the water will be a little bit loud. Just want to show you, use soap, wash your hand first. After you wash your hand, you want to do is to disinfect. Actually, you want to decide which faucet you want to collect water samples. So for the standpoint of drinking water safety, I recommend you to pick the faucet where you collect your drinking water. So like where you use that faucet for cooking, for drinking, for making coffee, use that faucet to collect water. So oftentimes it's the kitchen sink. So I'm in the kitchen, and you can see this is the kitchen faucet. And the first step it's just to remove the aerator. So I'm not sure how often you remove aerator. From my results shows oftentimes the water, like the bacterial contamination, is not caused by water itself. It's because of this aerator. So not sure if you can see that clearly. This aerator, you can see inside there's some like residual, some buildup in it. So you want to remove that because it may contain bacteria. So after you remove that, and that's also a good practice, just excise it a little bit, because if you don't remove aerators for a while, you may need a wrench to remove them. Because one house I went to collect their water samples, even with the wrench, I couldn't open it. Inside it's the buildup. It's just so hard to take it off. So that's also a good house maintenance. So once in a while, you remove the aerator, not just the kitchen, also all the like bathrooms, just to clean it a little bit, remove the buildup inside. And the next thing is you need to disinfect the faucet. And the disinfection, you can use any kind of household bleach. Doesn't need to be this brand. It can be also generic household bleach. Just making sure it's non-scented and it's not splashless. Because the splashless, this chlorine doesn't have enough content. It's not strong enough. Just use a regular household bleach. And there's a label here to show you like how much chlorine you need for disinfection. Just follow this process. So for the demonstration, I'm not going to put bleach into it. You follow the instruction and prepare a solution of disinfection water, just bleach and water. And what you need to do is just put the faucet into the solution. and leave there for a few minutes to disinfect it. And you can see for this kitchen faucet, I can do that. But sometimes the kitchen faucet or just the particular faucet that you use, it doesn't have this curve, so you cannot put a cup into it. So another trick you can do is after you prepare this solution, you dump the water into the bag, and then you put the Ziploc bag over the faucet for a few minutes. Just let it work, let it disinfect. So after you finish the disinfection, it's not time to collect water yet. You want to keep it running for 15 minutes. It's a little bit loud, but turn it on, let it run for 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, you reduce the volume like to that, just like a stream of pencil. The reason you want to do that is when you collect water samples, you don't want to overspill it. So you keep the water running just like a stream of pencil. Then you have a look at this sampling bottle. It might be a little bit loud just for the quality of this live talk. I turn off the water. So you want to keep it run for 5 minutes. And during this 5 minutes, you need to just get the bottle ready. And I just want to show you a little bit. Like I mentioned, it's a sterile bottle, and the inside they may have some, you may see the white powder. It's totally natural. That's how they stabilize the sample. And sometimes you will also see some moisture inside. That's also totally normal. Don't worry about that. What you want to check is the plastic wrap here, if it's well sealed. There's a red line here. If you don't see that, then you want to get another bottle. Just don't even waste your time. It may be contaminated. So what you do is pull off this plastic wrap and unscrew the cap. And when you collect water sample, like I mentioned earlier, you keep it as a pencil, like the stream of pencil. Do not put down the cap, because when you put it down, you can contaminate that. So your hands are clean, faucet is clean. You just put it under the faucet and collect it. And then meanwhile, you hold the cap. So it only takes about a minute, or probably just only 30 seconds. So when you collect it, you want to make sure it reaches to the 100 ml line. And I usually suggest collect it a little bit higher to the shoulder. After you collect it, just put the cap back on. So what I want to show you here, it's you can see this is the 100 ml line. So the water need to be above the 100 ml line. And you collect it a little bit higher, just to the shoulder. That will be the best. After you collect it, you just put it into the fridge. If you cannot drop it off immediately, if you can drop off the sample immediately, then put on ice and bring it to the lab. Because the holding time for bacteria sample to get a reliable results, lab usually require, it depends, 18 hours to 24 hours holding time. So you do not want to collect it like a few days in advance. Try to do it just the moment before you can drop it off. If not, just leave it just a few hours and then you send it to the lab. Then the lab will let you know if you have bacteria or not. So that's the demonstration. I want to show everyone how you can collect a bacteria sample. Another I want to mention, it's especially for city water. Let me step back a little bit. So what I want to mention is a water filter. Because for bacteria water sample, because sometimes the homeowner tell me it's I don't need to test it. I have a water filter, so it's fine. My water is safe to drink. Then I just ask them what kind of filters are you using? And oftentimes the answer is just that kind of filter. It's a water pitcher, a Brita filter, or something like that. So for this type of filter, inside is an active carbon filter. So active carbon filters, the mechanism it does is absorption. So if you have some inorganic contaminants, it may remove different, like depends, 30% to 70%. But when it comes to bacteria, these type of active carbon filters, they are the worst. They cannot remove bacteria. As a matter of fact, they are perfect medium for bacterial growth because it's just the active carbon inside. You have water and you have anything like just a carbon, a food source, organic matters. So they can be food for bacteria. So bacteria just thrive in the filter. So if you don't have bacteria in your water, don't worry about that. If you have bacteria and you're still using active carbon filter, you probably increase the population of bacteria in your water. That's also another tip I want to give everyone here. It's, if you use this type of water, like you are out of town or you haven't used that for a while, let's say a week, 2 weeks, after you come back, you just flush the filter. So like this one, you take the filter out, you take this filter out and let it run over water just for about 2 minutes. Or you soak into the water, dump it, soak into water for 5 minutes, dump it, and then rinse it. So the idea is just to flush it, what's inside before you use it. Similarly, if your refrigerator also has this type of filter, it's the same way. If you haven't used that for a while, flush the system for a few minutes before you use that. And another thing is always follow the instruction of your active filter. So if it tells you like change it every 6 months, you do want to change it every 6 months. Even you haven't used it that frequently during the 6 months, you still want to change it because over time, it's active carbon filter, like I mentioned, active carbon, it uses absorption. It has this carbon, it's treated and extremely porous, so it can absorb all the impurities. Once all the holes are filled up, the efficiency just decreases, the treatment effectiveness decreases. So over time, even you haven't used that, it's not doing such a good job. So just change it according to the manufacturer's recommendation. That's one thing I do want to show you here, especially I mentioned it's like especially for city water. It's the same also for well water. You tend to see it even in this aerator. You can see it's the buildup in it. So I'm not sure if you can see it, or the white powder. So that's because of Florida's hard water. So it's natural occurring because Florida underneath it's limestone. So the calcium concentration is quite high in Florida's water. So what I want to show you is this one. I haven't watched that. When I saw that, I'm like, that's great for today's talk. So if you see it has all the buildup, probably the camera couldn't catch it very well, but you probably can catch it here. You see all the white buildup. It may look quite nasty, but it's calcium, it's built up. So you can put into like vinegar, like anything acid, it can remove the buildup here. That's also usually some questions I get is they want to know how they can remove hard water. So first of all, if your water is hard, the definition of hard water is a concentration of calcium. It's higher than 108 ppm. So know your calcium concentration first. And if you want to treat it, first I want to let you know because calcium is not doesn't have adverse health impact, but it can be household nuisance. So it will cause like buildup in the pipe. It will decrease the efficiency of cleaning. So if you want to do that, a very it's a effective treatment method. It's water softeners because it uses ion exchange. It uses sodium ion to replace calcium ion. So which is very effective in reducing the calcium concentration in water. But on the other hand, it will also increase the sodium level in your water. So you want to, like I mentioned, you want to know what's the current calcium level now and what level you want to reduce to. In that way, you can figure out how much calcium you introduced into your drinking water. I have a webinar talk just about fluoridated hard water. I will put in the link if you're interested in knowing more about hard water. And I mentioned the 3 basic parameters you want to test: bacteria, lead, and nitrate. And for lead, because just the length of this talk, I'm not able to mention that. I have a webinar, recorded webinar. I will put in the chat box so you can check it out if you want to know more about lead in your drinking water. So with that, I would like to open the floor for discussions and see what kind of questions you have for your household drinking water safety. Let me check. I don't see anyone here. I'm not sure if it's just me, because I don't see Bill here. So who's viewing the video? Could you let me know if I'm still online? I know we have all kind of internet issues here. This platform, I cannot see anyone here. So I'm not sure I'm just talking to the air or I'm still talking to the audience. So if you are watching it, could you let me know?
Sure. I think the internet just started the weekend a little bit early, so.
Oh, great.
But I did share, I shared all the links that you share with me in the chat so people can click on them and watch your videos and get more information about clean drinking water and how to go about getting it tested to make sure it's safe. And I put in links for next week's episode where hopefully the internet will be running a little bit more stably. And I see that somebody can see you at least, so I'm trying to share the comment here.
Thank you, Heather.
Other than that, Wendy, do you have anything to add?
We dropped a Qualtrics link in the chat. So if you would just complete, it's a very short survey. It really helps us out a lot as UF-IFAS Extension faculty. And we just appreciate, it takes about 2 to 3 minutes to fill that out. And we appreciate those of you who have been completing those weekly. So thank you for that. And thank you for joining us today. And if you're watching this later, come on back next week. We have another session on Friday at 10.
That's great. I'm posting a link of the, like I mentioned, all the recorded webinars for well safety. It has hard water, lead in drinking water, and also your home water treatment systems.
Awesome. Thank you, Brittany. Thank you, Yilin. And thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we will hopefully see all of you again next week.